So I just finished Pikmin, which is a really interesting and unique take on RTS games. Weirdly enough, I've had this game since I think I got it actually really close to release. I was very young at the time, so yeah, I've had this game for a long damn time. I never ended up finishing it until just recently, and you know, when I was a young children playing this game, I didn't really think about, like, you know, what sort of genre it would fall into, because I didn't think about that sort of thing. It wasn't an idea that occurred to me, you know, because I was too young to like really worry about the idea of a genre. But you know, being older and looking back on this game, it's a super weird RTS on a console, which is yeah, what like, it's just such a weird thing to happen, because, you know, RTS has been, you know, a very PC dominated genre since most of them rely very heavily on, you know, on having the speed and fluidity of a keyboard or of a mouse interface to order around your guys. But yeah, this is a console RTS, and it's a console RTS in the way that that Time Splitters is a console shooter, which is to say, it doesn't try to do things the same way that the same way that PC shooters try to do, or in this case, the same way that PC RTSs try to do. It actually evolves and changes the gameplay and mechanics to suit the new control method, and I think that it works really well. Because of the fact that you are dealing with a controller, you no longer just control a cursor, rather you control an actual character who will lead your guys around and direct them and tell them what to do. And it also de-emphasizes the sort of micromanagement and like fine-tuned multitasking that you get in like StarCraft, where you have to very granularly manage each individual unit and make sure that they're doing what you want them to do at any given time. Instead, it places the focus more on large-scale planning of, okay, well, I'll have, you know, I'll put this group of Pikmin over here doing this thing and this group over there doing that thing, and while they're over there I can pretty much let them be and just let them do their thing and direct some other group of Pikmin around, and, you know, that sort of thing. Yeah, honestly, I like this take on RTSs a lot. I've never been super into StarCraft because whenever I've tried to play StarCraft style RTSs, the issue that I always run into is that I really enjoy the base building at the beginning of the game, and I think that that's a lot of fun, but then as soon as I get to the point where I have to do any combat, I like immediately start to lose interest because I don't find the combat fun. I don't enjoy having to micromanage my troops out on the battlefield and like, you know, decide exactly how many should be continuing the fight and how many should be retreating, and just like it's just not fun to me. I can't really wrap my head around it, and I don't have the acumen with the mouse and keyboard interface of these games and to really be accurate enough with my selections and movements to really make the most out of my resources that are available to me in combat. I'm not good at it, and I don't enjoy it, and it's always the downfall of these games for me. But Pikmin fixes that by just not making it even a thing. It's very much a simplified interface that again focuses way more on just, are you making the correct decisions, and if you are making the correct decisions, then execution is significantly less of a thing. I guess that's the big thing here, is that they're both RTS games that require you to manage large groups of allies in order to maximize your efficiency at performing given tasks and at performing combat, but StarCraft has a large focus on execution in addition to planning, whereas Pikmin is almost solely focused on planning, and there is very little of an execution barrier to it, which I like a lot. You know, I like games that require execution. I don't think that it works particularly well in the average RTS. So that's a big improvement as far as I'm concerned. The Pikmin themselves are pretty well differentiated. There's only 3 types of them: reds, blues, and yellows, but each one has their own particular pros and cons. Red ones are immune to fire and are the best in combat. Yellow ones can use bomb rocks, which are very useful for breaking down certain walls, and can also be thrown higher than any other type of Pikmin. And blue ones are probably the least, are the ones that probably have the least going on. They just are the only ones that can walk through water without drowning. But yeah, which they end up being very, very useful in the last area of the game, since it's a very water heavy area. So yeah, you've got these 3 broad categories of Pikmin, each of which has very clear like utility. Some of it's more situational than others. Like towards the end of the game, you're going to be wanting a lot of blue ones, but there's not really any point where you're going to want a lot of yellows. Like 40 to 50 yellow Pikmin total is probably enough to get you through the entire game if you can get your ranks up to that amount. Because the only thing that you're ever really going to need them for is bomb rocks and the occasional situation where there's an item that's high up on a ledge and only yellows can reach it. Whereas blues are going to be useful for just general utility anytime you're in an area that is watery, like again the last area, or not last area, but the 4th area of the game. The last area of the game is like the final boss area that's after you've finished every other area, but yeah, in the 4th area of the game, you're gonna be using blues a lot of the time for a lot of what you do, just because there's water fucking everywhere, so it just makes the most sense to have a large complement of blues as opposed to reds or yellows. But throughout most of the game, you're gonna mostly be using reds because they're the fastest at taking down enemies. They're just the best for combat, and their utility is in general just way less situational than blues or yellows. But they all do see a good amount of use. There isn't any particular type of Pikmin that I didn't feel like I ever wanted to have. You know, they all have their utility. Just some have more than others. I also think that they're pretty well differentiated in terms of like they feel like they have personality. And it's kind of stupid how that's done, actually, because there's so little to it. It's just, in addition to being different colors, they each have slightly different, like, anatomical features. So, red Pikmin are the only one that have noses, yellow Pikmin are the only one that have ears, and blue Pikmin are the only one that have mouths. And somehow that, like, gives each one a feeling of a distinct personality. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I always felt like they each felt like they had like a different kind of feel to them. But yeah, it's a good way to, you know, they're all very well differentiated. You know, you can really easily tell at a glance what each kind of Pikmin is and what it does, and it all makes sense and they all feel worthwhile. Yeah, I'd say that, like, right off the bat, in terms of just its concept and the base level execution of that concept, this game earns a lot of points just by having a really great idea and doing it really well at a basic level and making the minute-to-minute gameplay very enjoyable, of just walking around with your Pikmin, throwing them at anything that seems like a threat, you know, having them mob bulborbs and whatnot. Very enjoyable stuff. You know, the main, like, thrust of the game is that you've crash landed on this planet and have to collect 30 ship parts within 30 in-game days, one in-game day being about 13 minutes long. And the idea is that you have to get all your ship parts before your life support runs out, so that you can get off this planet that you've crash landed on. And you can only be active during the day, because at night much more powerful enemies will wake up and come out and be active, and it's not safe. So but yeah, the way that this sort of is done through gameplay is that, you know, you travel around, you break down obstacles that are in your way, you defeat enemies, and you carry the ship parts back to the ship. You have Pikmin carry things. You just mob them onto it, and it takes a certain amount of Pikmin to carry each particular item. You can have more than that amount in order to make them carry it faster, but there is a limit to how many you can have on a single item. They kind of remind me of ants, actually, when they're doing that. You know, a bunch of little guys carrying these gigantic things back to home base. You can also carry back enemy corpses and pellets and whatnot back to the Pikmin's little colony hive things called onions, and that will sprout more Pikmin for you. It's all, you know, it all kind of loops in on itself, where you get into this really fun gameplay loop of going out, exploring an area, clearing it of enemies, hauling back anything valuable, be it enemy corpses or pellets or ship parts, and you know, it all feels very satisfying. And you know, it all really comes down to time management, because again, you've only got like 13 minutes at a time in the area before you have to round up all your Pikmin and head back home and take off for the night, because there's dangerous enemies on the ground. But yeah, it's got a really strong core loop that's just very fun and satisfying. Although there are some little stumbles with the higher level execution here. Most notably, the game's challenge isn't quite there. A lot of the game is pretty easy, maybe even too easy, depending on how you look at it. And at the points where it does become difficult, it's mainly through inconvenience than actual difficulty. Like, there aren't very many enemies that I would say are actually hard to fight, like, and present like a serious challenge. I would say that the only ones that I ever found myself having difficulty with were burrowing snagrets, which are these snake bird things that can eat a lot of your Pikmin at a time. And their only weak point is their head, which is suspended off the ground, like on the end of their neck. So you gotta throw Pikmin up onto the head with a certain degree of accuracy, and that can be pretty difficult, and pretty satisfying. And then there's I don't remember what it's called, but it's basically a big four-legged spider dude with like plate feet, like dinner plate shaped feet, and he'll just stomp around and can step on several of your Pikmin at a time. And he also has, his only weak point is a head that's in the middle of his body, suspended between the four legs that you gotta throw Pikmin up onto. And again, that can be difficult, and it's pretty satisfying, and it's a good fight. But other than those ones, most of the challenge of this game just comes down to things being like inconvenient. This is really noticeable in the area called the Forest Navel, which is this kind of like desert sort of area that's got a lot of like small cliffs, I guess you could call them. I don't know, it's uneven terrain, and there's like only certain places that you can make your way upward, and your ship is in the middle at like the highest elevation point. And there's a lot of fences and whatnot that you got to break down in order to open more efficient routes, and the whole area, this environment, is just very inconvenient to traverse because you don't have any sort of way of like jumping or anything like that. So you can only make your way upward back towards home base at certain points. And that is, it kind of sucks a lot of the fun out of the area early on. I mean, once you've opened all of the routes and whatnot through the area, it's no longer an issue because you can just go, you now always have access to the quickest route. But when you first arrive there, like it's a much more difficult area just because it's really inconvenient, and it's hard to make a lot of progress because it takes so long to get back to your ship because there's the quickest routes aren't open yet. It's also worth noting that area is kind of annoying because there are multiple rock fences, which there are two types of fences in this game. There are like these like twig type ones that can just be knocked down by Pikmin smacking them. And then there's rock ones, which can only be broken with bombs. And you have access to a limited number of bombs in this area, and they're kind of off out of the way. So one, it's inconvenient to get to the bombs and get back to the wall and destroy them in like a timely fashion. And two, you don't actually have enough bombs to take care of all of these rock walls in one day, even if you just focus on the rock walls and don't do anything else that day. You don't have enough bomb rocks to do it. So this creates a situation where you have to spend like several days opening routes, and you can be getting ship parts in the process of this, but some of those ship parts you're not going to want to get yet because you don't have the quickest route to them open, and it's more inconvenient than difficult, and I'm not a super huge fan of that. It's also should be noted that when you're leading a full complement of Pikmin, you can have up to 100 Pikmin with you at a time. And when you start getting close to that number, the Pikmin all just sort of form a mob behind you, like a little roughly circular mob. And that can be difficult for moving around at times. It can be not great because sometimes there are... Like, a lot of the level design in this game is mostly designed with wide open areas in mind because they do know that you're going to be leading around this big, like, just crowd of Pikmin that you can't really control with any sort of fine-tuned accuracy. But there are certain points where the passageways and the bridges and whatnot are they're just a little bit, they're not quite wide enough to really make it feasible to get all 100 Pikmin across it at a time, and you kind of got to go in go in either smaller groups or risk leaving some behind or possibly even losing some to water. And that's not ideal, you know. I mean, obviously it would be better if all of the walkways and all that sort of things in the game were designed in such a way that you can reasonably expect to get through with as many Pikmin as you might want to, without having to worry about them getting stuck on walls or falling off and being where they don't need to be or anything like that. Other than that, there's, aside from like the fact that the Pikmin are very cute and charming and have you know, personalities and are easy to tell apart from each other, the enemies and ship parts are also all really unique and imaginative. There's some really out there ideas in here, and some that are just kind of weird. I mean, you got the main enemy of the game is the Bulborb, which is like this mushroom looking dog thing, I guess. It's got like this bulbous back end and like a thin snout and eyes on stalks. I've got a plushie of one of them somewhere in my room. It's pretty great, but yeah, it kind of reminds me of like the mushrooms from Mario, because it's like red with white spots on it, which I'm guessing is probably an intentional, like, you know, kind of visual detail there. But yeah, that's like the basic enemy in this game. So that tells you like none of these things are just like, oh, it's just a thing. I mean, with the possible exception of these like weevil type things that are just kind of bugs that burrow up from the ground. But even they don't look like any actual bug I've ever seen. It just looks like a new species of bug for the game. But yeah, and then you've also got stuff like there's this enemy type called Wallywogs, which are they're frogs, but they're asshole frogs, because most of the enemy types in this game will like eat your Pikmin, and you know, like yeah, you don't like the fact that they're eating your Pikmin, but you understand that they're not just being malicious. They are predators. They are searching for sustenance. Wallywogs are just dicks, like just straight up. They don't eat the Pikmin. They are just frogs that they leap into the air, they hang there for a second, and then they slam down, and any Pikmin caught underneath of them will be crushed and killed. And they do go out of their way to try to crush your Pikmin for no reason. They don't get anything out of it. They just love crushing Pikmin for some reason. God, what dicks. But yeah, then you got things like the fiery blowhog, which is this. It's just like a little roly-poly little like thing that's just got this round body, no sort of like eyes or face of any kind, but it's got like a long snout, and at the end of its snout, it breathes fire, and that's all there is to it. It just breathes fire on your Pikmin. I guess this is another one of the asshole enemies, because it doesn't like eat Pikmin, or it just burns them. It just fucking torches them. Fuck Pikmin, right? Just fuck them. Torch them all. And there's like another version of the blowhog too, where there's the fiery one, and then there's, I think it's called like the billowy blowhog, or maybe the gusty blowhog or something, but it's the same thing, only it's floating in the air and it's got a bunch of spikes on its back that don't do anything, and it actually has eyes, and instead of breathing fire, it just blows air really hard, and it doesn't even kill Pikmin directly. Like, this thing cannot directly kill Pikmin. All it can do is blow them around and, you know, screw them up so that other enemies can kill them. But like, it itself just blows your Pikmin around, and the defeating it actually feels like super brutal, because you got to throw Pikmin up onto it, and then once you've like hit it a certain amount of times, it'll fall onto the ground, at which point you can just immediately mob it with all your Pikmin, and they'll hold it down and just destroy it before it can get back up onto the ground, and it feels absolutely brutal. But yeah, and these are just like a few that are just immediately coming to mind. There's tons of really cool and unique enemy designs all over the place in this game, and the ship parts are also really cool. They've each got a little description they've each got 3 flavor text descriptions. So there's when you first walk up to the item out in the world and find it, Olimer is like, oh, it's such and such thing, and describes it a little bit, and then while the Pikmin are carrying it, if you go up and hit A, like, right up against it, then a second description, like, with a different little bit of flavor text will pop up. And then a third one pops up when it is gotten back to the ship. So you've got, like, a lot of flavor text from Olimer from all of these things. And you get, like, a sense of, you know, what each thing does in the ship, except for the ones that, like, are specifically, the joke is that Olimer does not know what they do. Like, there's one called the Extraordinary Bolt, it's just a bolt. Like there's nothing special about it to any outward appearance, and Olimer admits that even he doesn't know like what's supposed to be so special about it. It's just the guy at the dealership like really talked it up and was like, oh yeah, you gotta get the extraordinary bolt, and Olimer fell for it and he bought it, and it's implied that he like severely overpaid for what is basically just a bolt. But yeah, and then like there's like a spring thing that like manipulates gravity to be able to jump to light speed. There's a cannon that's used to like blast asteroids out of the way to make sure that he doesn't hit them, which evidently Olimer was not fast enough on the Nova Blaster earlier, because at the beginning of the game what happens is he gets hit by an asteroid and that causes him to crash land on the planet. but yeah, and he's got like all these little, there are 30 different ship parts in this game, and every single one except for the extraordinary bolt has a unique like purpose on the ship and actually like explains what it's for. And some of them aren't even like something that actually affects how the ship functions. It's just a nice thing to have. Like there are these two gems. They both look the same. They're called Libra and Sagittarius, and both of these are just presents that Olimer got from his kids, and he keeps them on the ship. They're part of the ship. He wants to have them, and it's just a little bit of sentimental value for him. And there's also nice little touches to the designs of the ship parts, like their models and whatnot. For example, when you find the pilot's seat, it's like this really ratty old cushion that's like, it looks terrible, and it's like heavily patched, and it looks like it's old as fuck. Like it's a terrible, cheap old cushion that's covered in patches and looks like it's really seen better days. And Olimer, and it just like that's a nice touch. It's like, oh, Olimer has just this old cushion that's not really that good, but he keeps it around, probably for sentimental reasons. Just all these little things that give Olimer more personality. Like by the end of the game, having listened to or having read, his descriptions and flavor text for all of the ship parts, and also his diary entry at the end of each day, because he keeps journals where the journals serve two purposes. Of one, they act as like tutorials for the non-essential mechanics, because obviously the essential mechanics are tutorialized like immediately as soon as they come up. But for non-essential mechanics, things like the Pikmin's flower system, where when you first get a Pikmin, they start off as a leaf, and they can be upgraded into a bud or a flower, which causes them to move faster. That's not an essential thing. You can go through the entire game just using leaf Pikmin if you so desire, but it's good to know about the flowers because it's nice to be able to have your Pikmin be able to move faster. So that's like a non-essential tutorial that's just nice to know about, and that's tutorialized in his journal entries, and all kinds of stuff. He has journal entries every night where he talks about what he learned that day about the Pikmin, what he's observed, and that teaches the player about how to play the game better, and it also helps flesh out Olimer's character. But by the end of the game, you have a really good sense of who he is. He's a family man, he's a salaryman, he's a trucker. He's a trucker, and he's running his deliveries because he's got to feed his family, and he cares about him, and he wants to get home, and he's a good guy, and I like him. Yeah, it's a really, like, all of this really comes together with the fact that it's such a unique RTS concept, and the fact that there's all these little details and this really strong visual design, and a lot of effort put into giving every like aspect of the game memorable personality, that it really is something special. And I would highly recommend checking out this game. It's not perfect. It could use a little bit more polish in terms of the level design and in terms of like movement of Pikmin, and it could probably also use like a little bit more content, because it's pretty short, especially if you are competent. I remember as a kid, I didn't play a whole lot of this game as a kid because it kind of stressed me out, like the idea of having a time limit and at the end of it you die if you don't have all the ship parts. And I was like, oh, how am I going to get 30 friggin' ship parts in as many days? Like I can't do it. There's no way that I can do it. And playing it again as an adult, it's actually a pretty easy game. Because, well, first of all, you don't even need to get all 30 ship parts. There are 25 ship parts that are required, and then there are 5 that are not absolutely necessary, but they're nice to get. But I ended up getting all 30 ship parts in 20 in-game days. Like it's not a difficult game. You can pretty easily get multiple ship parts in a day if you know what you're doing. You know, very early in the game, I collected several ship parts per day, and you know, just really got ahead of the ship part curve to the point where it was like there were a couple days where I didn't even get any ship parts, and it just wasn't a big deal because I was so far ahead that I was still way ahead of schedule. So yeah, and I wasn't even playing like optimally or anything. Like I wasn't planning super far ahead or anything like that. I wasn't looking stuff up ahead of time. I was just doing what came naturally as it happened, and just, you know, trying to making like a baseline effort to prioritize, you know. So it's not a super hard game, and you can beat it pretty quickly. I beat it in a couple days, just taking a sort of you know, a sort of relaxed kind of approach to it. So it could probably use a little bit more content than it has, but as it stands, I'd say that it's easily worth picking up and playing. There's not a whole lot there, but what is there is very good, and I'm looking forward to playing the sequel, which by all accounts has one, massively expanded the amount of content on offer, and two, polishes it up and, you know, really takes what was a cool concept and a very good game and really like expands out on it and improves it and makes something great. But even as it stands, I would say that Pikmin is a very, very good game that's, you know, really absolutely worth checking out. I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10 on my Rosen meter here.
It'll be great. Yeah, I said, it'll be great.
But yeah, I would definitely recommend going ahead and playing Pikmin, because it's worth your time.